The message arrived on a Tuesday, carried on a wave of electromagnetic radiation that made every radio telescope on Earth sing in harmony. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of the Allen array, her coffee forgotten in her trembling hands as the first clear, intentional signal humanity had ever received from the stars played across her monitors. "This can't be random," she whispered, watching as the pattern repeated itself with perfect precision. The signal contained clear mathematical sequences, prime numbers, the value of pi, and finally, a more complex data packet that would take weeks to decode. That was 6 months ago. Now Sarah stood in the United Nations General Assembly Hall, watching as humanity prepared to meet its first alien visitors. The Vexari, as they called themselves, had proven to be remarkably forthcoming in their communications. They were a confederation of species that had achieved interstellar travel millennia ago, and they came, they said, seeking peaceful contact and cultural exchange. The first Vexari ship appeared as a shimmering point of light above New York City, growing larger until its true form became clear. A massive vessel that resembled a crystalline snowflake, its surface refracting sunlight in impossible patterns. The ship was beautiful, but it was the beings that emerged that truly captured humanity's imagination. Ambassador HFY stood nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors with each movement. Its 4 arms moved with fluid grace as it addressed the assembly, speaking through a device that translated its harmonic language into perfect English. "We come in peace and fellowship," it said, its voice resonating through the chamber. "The Vexari Confederation has watched your species with great interest. Your resilience, your creativity, your diversity. These are qualities we value highly." Sarah sat in the front row, part of Earth's scientific delegation. Something about the ambassador's words made her skin prickle. She had spent months studying the Vexari communications, and there was something off about their intense interest in Earth's biodiversity. The truth began to emerge 3 weeks later. Sarah was working late in her lab, now upgraded with Vexari technology that allowed for unprecedented analysis of biological samples. She had been examining the results of tests on various Earth organisms exposed to Vexari environmental conditions when she noticed something strange. The Vexari weren't just interested in Earth's biodiversity. They were desperate for it. Their own worlds, for all their technological advancement, were dying. Centuries of engineering had created perfectly controlled environments, but had stripped their ecosystems of the ability to adapt and evolve. They needed Earth's raw, chaotic, ever-changing life forms to revitalize their dying biospheres. But it wasn't just samples they wanted. As Sarah dug deeper into the data, her blood ran cold. The Vexari planned to harvest Earth's entire biosphere, transferring it piece by piece to their worlds. Humanity would be preserved, of course, in carefully controlled habitats, studied and maintained like any other interesting species in their collection. She took her findings to Admiral James Chen, her brother, and one of the few military leaders who had been skeptical of the Vexari's sudden appearance. As they sat in his secure office at the Pentagon, surrounded by reports of Vexari ships appearing over major cities worldwide, they realized the scale of what they faced. "They're already positioning themselves," James said, examining satellite footage. "These aren't cultural exchange centers they're building. They're staging areas for a planetary-scale extraction operation." Sarah nodded, her face grim. "And the worst part? They genuinely don't think they're doing anything wrong. To them, this is preservation. They'll keep us alive, comfortable even. We'll just never be free again." James stood, walking to the window to look out over the Potomac. In the distance, a Vexari ship hung in the air like a second moon. "Then we have to stop them. But how do you fight an enemy centuries ahead of you technologically?" Sarah smiled, holding up a Petri dish containing what looked like ordinary soil bacteria. "The same way Earth's biosphere has always fought back, by being unpredictable. They've engineered the chaos out of their worlds, made everything perfect and controlled. But chaos, that's humanity's specialty. As they began to plan, neither of them knew they were about to start a war unlike any humanity had ever fought. A war not just for survival, but for the right to remain gloriously, chaotically human. The Vexeri had made one crucial mistake. They had looked at humanity's technology, at their weapons and defenses, and decided victory would be easy. But they had forgotten that humanity's greatest weapon had always been its ability to adapt, to think in ways that no other species could predict. And as Sarah looked at the bacteria in her dish, bacteria that could survive in the harshest environments Earth had to offer, she realized that sometimes the smallest things could change the course of history. The Vexeri had come to harvest Earth's biodiversity. They were about to learn why that diversity had evolved in the first place, to survive. 2 months after Sarah's discovery, the Vexeri's cultural exchange centers had spread to every major city on Earth. Their crystalline structures rose like alien forests, beautiful and terrifying in their perfection. But beneath the surface of this peaceful invasion, humanity was far from idle. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Sarah Chen stood before a group of the world's leading scientists and military strategists. The room was secured against any possible Vexeri surveillance, using technology that seemed primitive by their standards. Exactly why it worked. The Vexeri have a critical weakness, Sarah explained, bringing up images of their environmental systems. They've engineered their worlds to perfection, eliminated all biological uncertainty. But in doing so, they've lost their ability to handle the unexpected. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a microbiologist from Japan, stepped forward. We've been studying the samples from their ships. Their environmental control systems are incredible, but they're designed to handle known variables. They've forgotten how to adapt to the unknown. On the massive screens behind them, microscopic images showed what looked like ordinary bacteria, extremophiles collected from Earth's harshest environments. But these weren't ordinary anymore. Using techniques that would have seemed crude to the Vexeri, Sarah's team had been modifying these organisms, not to be perfect, but to be unpredictable. Admiral Chen took over the briefing. Operation Dustweaver is ready for Phase 1. The Vexeri's ships are their weakness, massive environmental systems that they depend on completely. They've never needed to consider biological warfare because their worlds are so perfectly controlled. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. The modified bacteria would be released near Vexeri installations, appearing to be nothing more than natural background organisms. But these bacteria had been designed to evolve rapidly, to adapt in ways that the Vexeri systems couldn't predict or control. They'll try to clean it up, of course, Sarah continued. But every time they do, the bacteria will adapt. Their systems will be fighting an endless battle against evolution itself, the very force they've forgotten how to handle. But not everyone was convinced. General Martinez, his face lined with concern, spoke up. And what stops these bacteria from affecting our own people? We can't risk a plague that kills us along with them. Sarah nodded, having anticipated this question. The bacteria are designed to thrive only in the specific environmental conditions the Vexeri maintain in their ships and facilities. In Earth's natural environment, they'll be outcompeted by native organisms within hours. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Under the cover of normal civilian traffic, teams began moving into position around major Vexeri installations worldwide. The bacteria were distributed in ways that appeared random, in soil samples, in water, in dust that would naturally be drawn into their environmental systems. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Vexeri continued their work, seemingly unaware of the microscopic war being waged against them. But inside their perfect systems, chaos was beginning to grow. The first sign came from a Vexeri facility in Brazil. Their environmental systems began reporting anomalies, minor at first, but growing more serious by the hour. The Vexeri engineers responded as they always had, attempting to eliminate the contamination. But for the first time in their long history, their methods weren't working. Sarah watched the data feeds with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The bacteria were evolving faster than anyone had predicted, finding new ways to survive the Vexaries' countermeasures. More importantly, they were beginning to affect the delicate balance of the Vexaries' artificial environments. They're starting to notice. Admiral Chen reported during one of their secure meetings. Vexari ships in orbit are requesting additional environmental control resources. They don't understand why their usual methods aren't working. But victory was far from certain. The Vexari were not a species that had achieved interstellar travel by being unintelligent. As the first facilities began showing serious signs of contamination, their response began to change. They're adapting, Sarah noted, watching new data come in. Not their systems. They themselves are starting to change their procedures. We'd forced them to begin thinking in ways they haven't had to for millennia. The race was on. Humanity had struck the first blow in a war the Vexari hadn't even known they were fighting. But as reports began coming in of Vexari ships taking more aggressive stances in orbit, it became clear that the element of surprise wouldn't last forever. In her private lab, Sarah worked tirelessly, examining new bacterial samples as they evolved. The Vexari had wanted Earth's biodiversity. Now they were getting it in its purest form, the endless dance of adaptation and survival that had shaped life on Earth for billions of years. They thought they could control us, she whispered to herself, watching through a microscope as her bacteria continued to adapt and change. They forgot that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to embrace chaos, to thrive in it. The question now was whether that strength would be enough. Because soon, very soon, the Vexari would realize they were under attack. And when they did, humanity would learn whether their gamble had paid off, whether the ability to adapt and evolve was truly more powerful than all the advanced technology of an interstellar civilization. The Vexari discovered the truth on a stormy Thursday morning. Sarah watched through reinforced windows as their ships took aggressive formation over New York, their crystalline surfaces now darkened with what could only be described as anger. Ambassador Zexpa's message was broadcast worldwide, its harmonious voice now carrying an edge of barely contained fury. "You have committed an act of biological warfare against the Confederation," it announced. "Your primitive attempt to contaminate our systems will not be tolerated. Surrender now, and we will still preserve your species, though under much stricter controls." In the command center beneath the Rockies, Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "They still don't understand. They think this is about winning or losing. They don't realize it's already too late." He was right. The bacteria had already spread throughout the Vexari's environmental systems, evolving and adapting faster than their technology could counter. But more importantly, it had forced them to abandon their carefully controlled procedures, to react with increasingly desperate measures. The Vexari's first retaliatory strike came at dawn. They attempted to sterilize their compromised facilities using radiation pulses that would have killed any Earth organism. But the bacteria, drawing on genes from Earth's most radiation-resistant organisms, survived. Some died, but others adapted, becoming even more resilient. "Look at these readings," Dr. Tanaka said, examining the latest data. "The survivors aren't just resistant to radiation now. They're using it. The Vexari just gave them a new energy source." Sarah watched as the microscopic war escalated. The Vexari tried chemical sterilization next, flooding their systems with compounds toxic to all known life forms. Again, some bacteria died, but others evolved, metabolizing the toxins into harmless compounds. The Vexari's perfect environments were becoming something else entirely: complex, chaotic ecosystems that their technology couldn't predict or control. Their ships, designed to maintain sterile conditions, were becoming incubators for ever-evolving life. But the Vexari weren't defeated yet. As their ground facilities became compromised, they withdrew to their orbiting ships, preparing for what humanity knew would be their most desperate move. "They're positioning for orbital bombardment," Admiral Chen reported, studying satellite data. "They'll try to sterilize the surface rather than let us contaminate their broader civilization." Sarah had anticipated this. "They can't," she said confidently. "Their ships are already compromised. Any aggressive action will just spread the bacteria further through their systems. The more they fight, the faster it evolves." She was proven right as the first Vexari ship attempted to power up its main weapons. The energy surge created heat, changing the environmental conditions in ways their systems couldn't handle. The bacteria, now evolved to thrive on energy gradients, spread exponentially through their power distribution networks. Warning signals began blaring through the command center. Multiple Vexari ships showing critical system failures, a technician reported. Their environmental systems are cascading. The Vexari's response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of continuing their attack, their ships began rapidly withdrawing from Earth orbit. But it wasn't a retreat, it was quarantine. "They're afraid," Sarah realized. "Not of us, but of what we've shown them. They're afraid of contaminating their entire civilization with chaos they can't control." The next transmission from the Vexari came not from Ambassador Zexpa, but from what appeared to be a higher authority. The being that appeared on their screens was clearly ancient, its iridescent skin dulled with age. "We have underestimated you," it said, its translated voice carrying what seemed to be genuine respect. "We sought to harvest your biodiversity, not understanding that it was not merely a resource, but your greatest weapon." Admiral Chen stepped forward to respond. "It was never meant to be a weapon. Life on Earth evolved through cooperation as much as competition. We only turned it into a weapon because you gave us no choice." The ancient Vexari was silent for a long moment. Perhaps we have forgotten more than we knew. Our perfect worlds, our perfect control. We thought we had achieved the peak of evolution. But you have shown us that perfection is stagnation." "It's not too late," Sarah offered. "We can help you restore true biodiversity to your worlds, not by harvesting ours, but by remembering how to let life find its own way." The negotiations that followed were unlike any in human history. The Vexari, humbled by their defeat at the hands of microscopic life, began to see Earth not as a resource to be harvested, but as a teacher. In her lab, Sarah continued to study the evolved bacteria, now seeing them not as weapons, but as pioneers. They had shown an advanced civilization that true strength lay not in perfect control, but in the ability to adapt, to change, to embrace the chaos that made life itself possible. The Vexari ships still hung in Earth's orbit, but they were different now. Their crystalline surfaces had begun to show signs of change, of adaptation. They were learning, finally, that perfection was not the absence of chaos, but the ability to thrive within it. And humanity, having faced extinction and emerged victorious, looked to the stars with new eyes. They had proven themselves not just worthy of survival, but capable of teaching one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations a lesson it had forgotten. That life, in all its messy, unpredictable glory, found a way. Not every Vexari accepted defeat gracefully. While the main Confederation fleet had withdrawn to prevent contamination, a radical faction emerged, led by Supreme Commander Vexnar, who saw humanity's bacterial warfare as an unforgivable offense against their perfect order. "They're coming back," Admiral Chen announced, watching as a new fleet of Vexari ships emerged from hyperspace. These vessels were different, darker, their crystalline surfaces treated with experimental coatings designed to resist biological contamination. Sarah studied the readings from their advanced sensors. They've modified their environmental systems completely. Multiple redundancies, isolated compartments, extreme sterilization protocols. They're not here to negotiate. The rogue fleet's ultimatum was simple. Earth would surrender and submit to complete sterilization, or they would render the planet's surface uninhabitable. They had abandoned their original plan of harvesting Earth's biodiversity. Now they only wanted to eliminate what they saw as a galactic contamination risk. "You don't understand what you've done." Vexnar's transmission boomed across all frequencies. "Your chaos threatens everything we've built, every world we've perfected. We cannot allow it to spread." Humanity's response came not just from military leaders, but from scientists, philosophers, and ordinary citizens who refused to submit to the Vexari's sterile vision of perfection. Earth's combined military forces mobilized, even knowing they were technologically outmatched. But the real battle wasn't being fought with conventional weapons. The bacteria that had evolved in the first wave of ships had continued to adapt, developing new capabilities that even Sarah hadn't predicted. They had become something entirely new, a bridge between the ordered world of the Vexari and the chaotic potential of Earth's biosphere. Dr. Tanaka made the crucial discovery in her lab. The bacteria aren't just surviving in their systems anymore, she reported excitedly. They're communicating with them, creating interfaces between biological and technological systems that the Vexari never imagined possible. The rogue fleet's first attack came at dawn. Their weapons were devastating, designed to eliminate all traces of biological life. But Earth wasn't defenseless. The evolved bacteria, now present in the atmosphere itself, responded to the attack in ways that defied conventional science. They formed living shields, converting energy weapons into fuel for further evolution. They created networks that linked Earth's defense systems with biological responses that no computer could predict. Humanity had not only weaponized evolution, they had turned it into a shield. Vexnar's forces pressed their attack, but with each failure, more Vexari began to question their fundamental assumptions. Their perfect systems, designed to eliminate uncertainty, were being defeated by the very chaos they sought to destroy. The breaking point came when a group of younger Vexari, fascinated by the potential they saw in Earth's adaptive defense, broke ranks with Vexnar's fleet. They had seen something their elders couldn't, that perfection without adaptation was a dead end. Your war is not with humanity, they broadcasted to their own kind. It is with the future itself. We have spent millennia trying to eliminate chaos, only to find that we have been eliminating our own potential for growth. The conflict that followed wasn't just between ships and weapons, but between two fundamentally different visions of civilization. The rogue fleet's perfect order began to crack, not from external attacks, but from the realization spreading through their own ranks. Sarah watched from her lab as the Vexari ships began to change. Some maintained their sterile perfection, fighting to the end for their unchanging vision. Others began to show signs of adaptation, their crystalline surfaces developing patterns that seemed to flow and shift like living things. The final battle was almost anticlimactic. Vexnar's dwindling fleet, caught between Earth's evolved defenses and their own transforming civilization, faced a choice: adapt or become extinct. In the end, the very perfection they had sought for so long became their prison, leaving them unable to respond to a universe that demanded change. As the last of the rogue ships either retreated or surrendered, humanity and their new Vexari allies began to understand the true significance of what had happened. They had not just won a war, they had sparked an evolution in one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The bacteria that had started as weapons had become something else entirely, a symbol of life's endless capacity for change and adaptation. In laboratories across Earth, humans and Vexari worked together, learning to combine the best of both their worlds. The stability of Vexari technology with the adaptive potential of Earth's biosphere. We thought we were fighting for survival, Sarah reflected, watching a new kind of crystal grow in her lab, one that combined Vexari engineering with Earth's biological principles. But we were really fighting for something more important: the right to change, to evolve, to become something new. The breaking point had come not in violence, but in understanding. The perfect order of the Vexari and the chaotic potential of humanity had found a balance, opening up possibilities that neither civilization had imagined possible. The galaxy would never be the same, and that both species were beginning to realize was exactly the point. 5 years after the breaking point, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the first hybrid Earth Vexari research station in orbit around Saturn. The station's crystalline walls pulsed with a subtle bioluminescence, a visible sign of the merger between Vexeri technology and Earth's adaptive biological systems. Hard to believe it all started with bacteria in a Petri dish, Admiral Chen said, joining his sister at the viewport. He had traded his military uniform for the new insignia of the Earth Vexeri Scientific Coalition, though he still carried himself with a soldier's bearing. Below them, Saturn's rings glittered, now home to a network of research outposts, where humans and Vexeri worked together to explore the possibilities of their combined knowledge. The station itself was a testament to their new partnership. Its systems were neither purely technological nor purely biological, but something entirely new. The Confederation Council is meeting next week, Sarah said, checking the latest reports on her tablet. They're voting on officially recognizing Earth as a founding member of the new Adaptive Technologies Division. The changes in Vexeri society have been profound. Their once rigid civilization had begun to embrace controlled chaos, understanding that true stability came not from eliminating change, but from learning to adapt to it. Their perfect, sterile worlds were slowly being transformed, reintroduced to the principles of evolution that they had forgotten millennia ago. But the transformation hadn't been one-sided. Humanity had learned from the Vexeri as well, discovering ways to guide and direct evolution without stifling it. The bacteria that had once been weapons had become tools of creation, helping to terraform hostile environments and repair damaged ecosystems. Dr. Tanaka's team had made perhaps the most startling discovery. The bacterial networks that had evolved to interface with Vexeri technology had developed into something approaching consciousness, not artificial intelligence, but actual living intelligence that bridged the gap between organic and mechanical systems. We're receiving another delegation from the outer worlds next month, Admiral Chen mentioned. More species who want to learn about adaptive engineering. Seems we're becoming something of a galactic teaching center. Sarah nodded, remembering how different things had been just a few years ago. The Vexeri had come to Earth looking for resources to harvest, never imagining that their true salvation would come not from taking Earth's biodiversity, but from learning to recreate it. The station hummed with activity as teams of human and Vexeri scientists worked on projects that would have seemed impossible before. They were creating new forms of space travel that used living ships, developing medical technologies that combined Vexeri precision with human adaptability, and exploring ways to restore life to worlds that had been sterilized by generations of over-engineering. But perhaps the most profound change was in how both species now viewed the galaxy. The Vexeri had learned that perfection wasn't an end state to be achieved, but a process of constant adaptation and growth. Humanity had learned that their greatest strength wasn't their resilience or their technology, but their ability to embrace change itself. Ambassador Zexfa's memoirs are being published next month, Sarah mentioned, smiling at the irony. The former ambassador had become one of the strongest advocates for the new hybrid civilization they were building. They're calling it the perfect imperfection, how humanity taught us to live again. An alert chimed softly, drawing their attention to a display showing an incoming ship. It was one of the new hybrid vessels, its crystalline surface alive with patterns that reflected its internal biological systems. These ships could adapt to space phenomena that would have destroyed purely mechanical vessels, learning and evolving with each journey. Ready to make history again? Admiral Chen asked, gesturing to the ship. That's the first long-range exploration vessel of its kind. The Council wants us to lead the mission. Sarah watched as the ship docked, its surface shifting to match the station's biological rhythms. This was their legacy, not just surviving an invasion or winning a war, but showing the galaxy a new way forward. They had proved that true strength lay not in perfection or chaos, but in finding the balance between them. As they prepared to board the ship that would take them into unknown space, Sarah thought about the bacteria in that first petri dish. They had evolved to survive in the harshest conditions, adapted to interface with alien technology, and ultimately helped bridge the gap between two very different civilizations. You know what the best part is, she said to her brother as they walked toward the airlock. We're still evolving. Every day, we're becoming something new. And now the whole galaxy is evolving with us. The ship's crystal walls pulsed with welcome as they stepped aboard, its living systems already adapting to their presence. Ahead of them lay unexplored stars, new challenges, and endless possibilities for change and growth. They had taught the galaxy that perfection wasn't about achieving a final, unchanging state. It was about never stopping growing, never stopping learning, never stopping evolving. And that, perhaps, was humanity's greatest gift to the stars. The understanding that in a universe of endless possibility, the only true perfection was the courage to change.